Hello everybody and welcome to Talking Trades here at 7AFL, just over 24 hours before the end of the NAB AFL Trade period 2018, and there are still plenty of big guns that haven't found new homes. Tom Scully has, so has a very high draft pick. Both will be heading to the Hawks. We'll get to that very shortly, but before all of that, what's making news? Tom Browne.
Well, Tom Scully, the big story, Cam, this afternoon. This is a developing story. It's got a twist. It involves a fourth-round pick, which is more controversy than we thought a couple of days ago. I had this story last Friday. There's just been a bit of argy-bargy, which I'll explain shortly, over the money in particular, and obviously also over this pick. I'll also tell you how this deal developed last week as well. So a lot of talk over Scully, and also talk this afternoon over this super trade. It all hinges on Fremantle. Their CEO, Steve Rossage, due to arrive in Melbourne tonight. He's not necessarily on the same page as Bell and Lyon, who are already here. I'll explain more on that shortly as well.
Plenty of talk around Stephen May as well, on the possibility of any Victorian club being able to snaffle the key defender from the Suns. But today, completed trades. Scully and Scrimshaw are at the Hawks. Hall and Smith has left the Cats to go to the Suns. Aaron Hall has left the Suns, ended up in North Melbourne, and Stengel has gone from the Tigers to the Crows. But we'll start with Tom Scully, who has been traded officially for a future fourth-round pick. What can you tell us?
At the moment, Mark Kleiman, his manager who represents TLA, is down at AFL House, just metres away from where we are filing those papers. That deal has been done for a future fourth-round pick. Don't drive off the road or drop your phone on the train. It's a future fourth-round pick that deal's done for. There was controversy this week. Was it Kane Corn suggesting the AFL should intervene for a pick in the 50s? I
am still not 100% against. I know you disagree with Kane Corns. I'm not 100% against what he is suggesting. I think the AFL are going to raise an eyebrow in either not specifically just this exact deal, but why the Giants have to get rid of what looks like about $2.5 million in salary for next year.
I've got some thoughts on that.
Can I tell you this? If the Hawks are to win a flag, now they've got Scrimshaw as well, which they got for a steal. We'll get to that in a moment. They've got Tom Scully now. They are firming probably $1 to be able to get Chad Wingard now that Ryan Burton has passed that Port Adelaide medical. If they win a flag, that future fourth rounder, and I'm not very good at maths, but it's maybe pick 72, 73, or even 75 when it works out compensation picks. On the back of it, now you told us last Friday that he's passed the medical. On the back of that,
I predicted the deal. I thought the deal had basically been done.
If he adds and plays as he was the best wingman 12 months ago, big ifs on his ankle for obvious reasons, they are able to get a guy who is almost an A grader for pick 75. That could help him win a flag. That is remarkable scenes.
As I said yesterday, the reason Kane's suggestion was a little bit silly in my view, and I'm not criticising Kane, was that it's disrespectful to the Giants list management guys. They know this situation in their view. They obviously feel...
Well, someone's made a mistake here though, Tom.
No one's made a mistake. Clearly, the Giants' view is that I'm not a doctor, so don't come running to me. But obviously their view is the cartilage or the bone on bone is at such a degenerate state, that ankle, they don't believe he's worth much. Now, when I say they don't believe, and there's your evidence.
Which is fine, yeah, but the evidence is that Hawthorn are going to pay him $500,000 a year. So it's all well and...
There's been a delay of the last few days.
Okay, well, what can you tell us about the cash?
There's been a delay since last Friday with respect to the deal. It could have been announced potentially last Friday. The delay's been over the cash situation. And given the fact that Hawthorn, hasn't obviously had to, given the fact that it's a future pick 4, you'd suggest Hawthorn's paying the whole bulk of that wage, if not the whole thing. Now, clearly Hawthorn think they can get that ankle right, and let's hope for Scully's sake they do. He was one of the best players in the competition before this happened. That's how everyone's remembering him. But I can tell you for a fact, which I've touched on this program in the last few days, the Giants were shopping Scully around to an alternative club, which I won't name, last Tuesday or Wednesday for a pick in the 50s. That was their view of this deal and Scully's fitness at that time. So this hasn't just come out by accident. They wanted to get whatever they could get for Scully.
He's still got the foot attached to him, hasn't he? He's definitely got the foot attached.
Last time I checked, the foot hasn't been fused. He's able to run and it's attached. But judging from this deal, it's got all the hallmarks of helping out with their assistant coaching department.
The thing is, and of course, salaries aren't public, so we don't know exactly what he's on, but he's a player that went there for a great deal of money. So we're restructured to help sign some of those guys who now essentially getting traded out as well. We'll say $500,000 to be conservative, okay? So even if the ankle's no good or he passed a medical, and obviously Hawthorn and the Giants have much differing views on him playing football in 2019 and beyond, Hawthorn is still going to pay him $500,000 out of that salary cap. They must be very confident that he can play football next year, increasingly confident, or they wouldn't. The pick's one thing. To pay a guy $500,000 a year is another.
They must be confident that they can play him on what I'd describe as a modified program. I don't think he's going to play 23 games. They must think that similar to what they do, I guess, with O'Meara, playing in blocks of footy. If
you think about it, you add if, and yet again, big if, and only hindsight will be the only real, telltale sign out of this situation. In 5 years' time, we'll be talking about how the Giants are able to have the fire sale and it worked, or we'll talk about another Clarkson-led premiership that included getting a Tom Scully who dominated the wing at the MCG on grand final day for pick number 75. As it stands, right now, their midfield, Tom Mitchell, the Brownlow medalist. O'Meara had a pretty good year, although they missed that final that they lost against Melbourne with the injury. If you throw then Wingard in, you can play a little bit in the midfield, which looks to be done. Then you're able to, Scrimshaw if he gets going, throw Tom Scully in. Now, this midfield's actually looking better and better by the day. Huge question marks based on a couple of injuries around these guys. But as it stands right now, Alistair Clarkson, as he does each and every year, wide developed players. I say this in the draft. If you think you can win a premiership, don't worry about going to the draft and holding these high draft picks. Steal a flag or take a flag when it's at the offering, because there's not many times you get that opportunity.
I agree. As you said, though, it's heavily contingent on the fitness of that group. I don't want to get bogged down in the Giants because I want to concentrate tonight, not just on the Victorian clubs, but I think there's most of the interest surrounding some of the bigger clubs, admittedly. But this Giant situation could go down as the biggest salary cap mismanagement in the history. And I say mismanagement, no rules have been broken. They have mismanaged. They've got a 5-year projection, all these clubs, a spreadsheet. If you ever got access to that Excel document, I'd love it. It would show future, imagine that. You'd get the future 5-year projections, right? Surely that figure has been, you don't need to be an accountant to work out, or a stockbroker or an investment banker to work out the figure for 2019 must have been somewhere in the vicinity of $2.5 million over. This is an absolute stuff-up of epic proportions.
I've got a theory on that which contradicts that just a little bit. This is what I think the Giants are going to do. The rules are, as you would know, that if you pay 95% of your salary cap one year, you can pay 105% of it the next year.
Yeah.
I think they're getting their salary cap down to 95% for 2019. So then they can, Canelio, Kelly, and Whitfield, clearly players they hold in higher regard than the Shields and the Scullys of the world right now. They can say, here's Godfather offers for all three of you because we can stretch it to 105 in that first year. Or if, and we expect North Melbourne again to have a huge play for, say, Josh Kelly, maybe a Saints to have a huge play for Lockie Whitfield, these clubs that have huge cap space in states where these players grew up, they can match it in an unprecedented move and say, you can throw as much money as you want at these guys because we're going to sit back in free agency, match, restrict, and you're going to work with us on the trade deal.
Can I counter that just with 2 points? The difference there, the 10% on the current cap, say, if the current cap, say, 12.8, is about 1.28 million. So it only gives you 1.28 million wiggle room, which is better having than not. The other point is the Brett Delidio thing, which could have paid off had Delidio have helped them win a flag in a fairy tale this year. I get it. It didn't, unfortunately, pay off. I love Brett Delidio. But the Brett Delidio thing was the difference. They paid him, say, a 3-year or 4-year deal. Let's call that between 1.5 and 2. If they hadn't have done the Delidio deal, when they had the future projections, they would have been better placed, in my view, to keep Shield, keep Lobb, well, obviously Scully's different, but they were better off and Setterfield. So I reckon the Delidio deal, in retrospect, and everything's easy in retrospect, has really stuffed up their projections.
Because you know what? They have just gone all in to win a premiership, which I have no issues with. Now, it hasn't worked out. 2 prelims, a semi-final this year, lots of injuries, lots of different excuses, a lot of questioning of Leon Cameron. I'm not going to sit here and say that he can or can't coach, but had they won a premiership, and hindsight's such a wonderful thing, but everyone thought they were building a premiership contender 3 years ago when they probably should have won in 2016. They all said, let's keep this group together. And they had a real crack at it, and it didn't work out. So I actually think they expected to have a premiership. And then if Scully's gone, Shields gone, Lobb's gone, if everyone just leaves, they're like, well, you know what? We got a flag against the run of what everyone expected.
And we'll get to this point. I won't labour this point, but that's what the Beams deal to Collingwood has all the hallmarks of. Bucks having tasted 5 points of winning the flag, he'd be thinking, if I had an extra midfielder to shut down the Eagles in that last 3 quarters, someone to jump on the top of the ball when Pendles and a few guys were a bit off, guess what? He'd be on holidays now with the Jock McHale medal.
One of the most successful clubs in the AFL, and I don't at all argue this point, is the Sydney Swans. They've won 2 flags since 1933, which gives you an indication of how hard it is to win these things. So when you have an opportunity, you go and get it. And there's a couple of Victorian clubs, in fact, all of them, because the news this afternoon is that Stephen May is open to play for any Victorian club. What can you tell us?
Well, I might have asked the wrong question yesterday. I had a story on our news last night explaining that Collingwood and Melbourne were still in the race. I think the real question was that everyone's kind of in the race, which we kind of knew, but it just shows that Stephen May doesn't want to be a passenger to this super deal, which we'll discuss shortly.
Yep.
He wants to potentially take matters into his own hands, wants to get back to Victoria, and is open to an offer from a range of clubs. He's not prepared to risk the Melbourne situation. Melbourne might not have a pick to offer if they can't get Hogan to Fremantle, and he's not prepared to risk the Collingwood situation. They've only got to pick, I think, 18, for example, and which they'll probably use in the Beams deal. So he's not prepared to risk that. But it also shows, as I touched on yesterday, how keen Stuart Dew is not to have any passengers, any people at the Gold Coast Suns that are umming and ahhing about being there. He wants on the 1st of November, wherever they go back, everyone to be 110% invested, and if you're not, they'll do a deal, and I think it's got to that point.
Hashtag talking trades at 7AFL. I put a poll up about an hour ago. Should Carlton trade pick one for Stephen May?
I wanted this tweet to be taken
for the
down.
92% of people who called me a moron, there is a little bit of science behind it. And I asked the question because I don't think they should give this year's pick one up. Sam Walsh is going to help the club, but I reckon there's a way they can trade next year's future first rounder for Stephen May and back themselves in. If they finish last next year, then they've got much bigger issues than losing pick one in 12 months' time. Stephen May would be their best defender. For everyone who kept replying saying, oh, they're pretty good down back, I'm not saying they're horrible. Stephen May would be the best defender in the Navy Blue if they played next year. I would offer a future first round. I wouldn't give up the first round pick. I asked the question, though, because while the Gold Coast Suns are thinking, yeah, you know what? Got to probably get rid of Stephen May because we're going to totally reset and we want people who are committed long term. They also know that if they do ride it out for 12 more months, I expect the Suns to win the wooden spoon and they'd get pick 2 as a compensation. So if you go and offer pick 10, the Suns might say, well, we'll just hold him for another 12 months and get pick 2. So that's the reason I ask, because the only team that has better than pick 2 this particular year is the Suns and the Blues. Yeah, I don't think they should do it, but the question has to be asked.
Go close to getting it done, you'd think. Now, St Kilda's not going to give up.
But it's still pick 2. It'll be pick 2. I'd be stunned if this. Look.
No, my mail is that Stuart Dew, and I respect what you're saying, but I think my mail is that Stuart Dew.
So you reckon they'll take unders to reset right now?
There's another year of like the situation with Prestia, the situation with Ablett, and the situation with Lynch, which is just killing the club. So they can't afford that. They've got to move forward.
Who would you make captain of Richmond next year?
Captain of who?
Yep. Gold Coast.
Oh, the Gold Coast. That's a very, very good question. Who
don't know. We might talk about it tomorrow night in our finale because I have no idea. I was thinking about it today. Taylor Duray is a dog. I've gone from the Hawks in exchange for a future 4th rounder. So some pushing in, obviously, as the midfielders come in particular at the Hawks. He's looking for a fresh start, so he's off to the Western Bulldogs. All right, the super deal. The one that 24 hours ago we thought might have happened today. Still Beams is in Brisbane. Lachie Neale's in Western Australia. Still Jesse Hogan is being floated as a defender. Where does it all sit for you? And I believe you have some news on where Chris Fagan might be today.
Yeah, there's some strong whispers that Chris Fagan's in Western Australia today, just helping out Lachie Neale in terms of, I guess, getting him right, just with Brisbane courting Neale. But critically, everything now hinges, all roads lead to the Dockers in essence, because at the moment, Dane Beams is stuck at Brisbane, Lachie Neale stuck at Fremantle, Jesse Hogan stuck at Melbourne, and Stephen May stuck at the Suns. There is growing talk now that all those deals could essentially be lodged at the same time, but it depends on a few things. We'll start with Fremantle. It depends on the fact that Fremantle is prepared to give up Neale. My information still is that Ross Lyon doesn't want to do that. Ross Lyon's currently been in Melbourne, been here all week, I think just, getting across trades, as has Peter Bell. But the CEO, Steve Rossich, is flying in tonight, and the mail is that Steve Rossich wants to get this deal done. So everything really hinges on Neale getting to Brisbane. Now, the second question becomes whether Fremantle indeed have done this black flip and want Hogan. My sources in Western Australia, I sort of asked them, well, why don't Fremantle want Hogan? And they say things like, oh, he's been going out. Well, he's not the only player that goes out this time of year. There's also some speculation. All it is speculation. I'm not casting dispersions that Jesse Hogan's likes an occasional cigarette. There's plenty of players that like cigarettes.
If that actually stops Fremantle from picking up Jesse Hogan, this is what we do too often in society and in football or in sport. We focus on things they do, okay? You know what he does? Kicks 50 goals a year when he can stay on the park, which is what desperately Fremantle need. As long as it's nothing illegal, which, smoking, if he does enjoy it, and it's not good possibly for his long-term health, but it doesn't seem to affect his footy. He's still an exceptional footballer. And if that's a reason why, then we're focusing on the wrong things here.
I think that Jesse Hogan, I think will get to Fremantle, but it all depends on that. If Fremantle tomorrow, so we don't want Hogan, and we're not trading Neale, this super deal is going to fall over. But obviously it would involve Collingwood giving up 2 first-round picks this year and next year. That in turn would go to Brisbane, which would leave Brisbane with one of those future first-round picks. and Fremantle getting a little bit extra for Neil, and that's the way the deal would work. So that's what is really going to play out tomorrow, the Shield deal and also the Wingard deal still outstanding.
This is the thing.
Super deal's a big one.
The super deal, right? Everyone's like, who are the winners and the losers of trade period and all the rest. It happens every year. Or it is, there's two major winners from this particular trade period. Collingwood's been okay.
Yeah.
West Coast Eagles kept the best free agent in the game and won a premiership. And the Richmond Football Club won a minor premiership and got in Tom Lynch, who was a superstar.
West Coast have got the two best recruits of the draft,
Yeah.
Nick Nat Newey and Andrew Gatt.
They have, and people forget that. But don't focus on winning or losing or paying overs and unders. In this super deal, Fremantle get better because they get a forward, maybe two with Rory Lobb to come in.
So Ross Lyon goes to sleep tomorrow night thinking, I've got a forward, obviously in Hogan, who's going to complement my existing forward line. The Lions go to sleep. Chris Fagan goes, I've lost Dane Beams, but he only half wanted to be here. But I've got Lachie Neale, an elite midfielder with Zorko.
Collingwood get an elite midfielder in Dane Beams right in their premiership window.
Yep.
And really, Melbourne, they had Stephen May, who I think is an exceptional footballer.
With Lever fit, they've got one of the best defences in the league.
I still say it, I said it all week, as you have. I wouldn't let Jesse Hogan go, but they're all winners. So they're focusing, it seems to be focusing on over and unders. Don't worry about that. Yeah. Oh, we deserve a little bit more. Just make sure that you get better, even if you had to pay a little bit extra, because they all play an important part in those clubs getting better next year.
Speaking of deserving a little bit more, as Adrian Dodoro reverted to his old tricks, he used to be regarded as a bit of a tough negotiator that basically blew up trade period. This time he landed the trade trifecta last year, Dodoro. He kept most of their players post-drug saga together and re-signed. And now he's got Shield on board.
Has he got? Because that Dylan Webb's asking us on Twitter, where is it? Where's Dylan Shield?
In modern trade terms is a genius. But what's happening with the Dylan Shield deal? So basically the Giants want 2 first-round picks. Essendon saying, we'll give you a first-round pick and a future second. Is that right?
Apparently.
So what's he worth? I think given, if you take a bullish view, as I said yesterday, of Essendon on the ladder, I think Essendon's position on this is quite fair, but I don't know. What do you think?
He's worth what the first and the second rounder is what you'd probably have to give to Dylan Shield, who's a good footballer. But Giants have sort of set themselves up a little bit because they're dumping salary like the Titanic was trying to dump water back in, was it 1914 or 1915? So
this deal's going to get done.
It'll get done, but the argy-bargy I don't mind. You know, tomorrow, we've got to get out of here. Tomorrow is going to be the most epic day in the history of the AFL because we're going to see possibly 50 trades, or we're going to see nothing happening, and it's going to set up an amazing off-season where we're going to have players having to go back to their football clubs to which they wanted to leave.
Can I just say quickly, I wanted to add to tonight's show, and I'll keep it very brief. Tim Kelly, his bluff hasn't paid off. He said, I'll stay at Geelong or go to West Coast. I'm homesick. Well, Geelong obviously said, well, you're not homesick. He's prepared to stay here. Now they're calling him on it. So that hasn't played off. And the Giants' messaging, I don't think, has been very clear. They say, we're prepared to keep Scully and we're prepared to keep Shield, because but also we've got salary cap problems. That's not consistent messaging. If you want to bluff in the trade period and get the deal right, you've got to stare down the camera and not have any deviation. And I reckon they've had their foot in the salary cap camp and the injury camp and got caught halfway. Clearly, they're prepared to trade Scully, perhaps on an injury basis, and they've got to clear the room for Shield. So the salary cap room. So I reckon Essendon's going to win that game of bluff. #
Talking Trades at 7AFL. We're going to be back tomorrow as it all wraps up at 7:30 tomorrow night. We're going to be here. Adam Cooney, my old armchair experts man, is going to, and knows about trade week as well, talking about getting traded for a low number. I think it was like pick 192 that the Dogs got rid of Coons. And of course,
is that a sore point?
The moment he left, they made the finals and won a premiership 2 years later. So you're looking forward to seeing him tomorrow. # Talking Trades. Get involved at 7AFL. Going to be a huge day to wrap up the NAB trade period in 2018. Tommy, see you tomorrow.
Look forward to it.